Well, hello and welcome to Rajat TV. You're watching COVID-19 India Fights Back with your host, Rajat Kain. Well, in this edition of the show, we'll take up the issue of credibility of research in vaccine for COVID-19 as medicine firms and experts all over the world are racing to get the right vaccine. There are some findings in the trials of AstraZeneca-University of Oxford vaccine that has raised question about the way vaccine clinical trials have been handled. Well, let me also add that AstraZeneca-University of Oxford vaccine is being tipped as the most, we can say, the latest or something to arrive at the earliest of several candidate vaccines. Now, the errors in the trials of the candidate vaccine has been acknowledged by AstraZeneca and Oxford University, terming it a manufacturing error. What's more alarming, the error has been discovered days after the company and the university described the shots as highly effective. So what do these findings mean for the credibility of research on the efforts to arrive at suitable vaccine? To discuss more on the issue, we are joined with three very important guests. We're joined with Dr. Gagandeep Singh. Well, ma'am, thanks for joining us. Dr. Vish Karmakar, advisor CSIR, and Dr. Mamta Gupta. She is from Department of Medicine and School of Public Health, PGMR, Chandigarh. Well, thanks all of you for joining us. Well, let me start with you, Dr. Gagandeep Singh. Ma'am, could you explain us about the quantum of difficulties we are staring in terms of having a right or suitable candidate vaccine given the erroneous findings in AstraZeneca-Oxford University trials? Ma'am.
Thank you, Rajat. What I'd like to do is just to talk to you about the results that were presented first.
Sure, ma'am. Right.
The results that are presented are from two studies, COV002 and COV003. And in one study, what happened was that some of the participants were given half the dose of the vaccine. Now, when we talk about half the dose, we must understand the difference between the two doses, because half and full sounds like a lot. But actually what we are talking about is the difference between 25 billion virus particles and 50 billion virus particles. So in terms of the immune response, I think it would be very difficult for an immune system to tell about much of a difference between 25 and 50 when the number that follows them is a billion.
Okay.
So
certainly, yes. Yeah.
This seems to have happened due to an error in measurement when the vaccine was tried out. I've actually checked the clinical trial registration site, and I find that the trial information about this error was communicated to the regulators as far back as May. And the regulators were aware of this, and the regulators allowed for the trial to proceed with the second dose being given as a full dose. And when it comes to the analysis that was presented earlier this week, this was done in the format that the regulators wanted. Now, I find this a bit unusual.
Okay.
Because I would have treated the trials as two separate trials, one which has the low dose and the high dose, and the other one which has two high dose vaccinations, which is similar to what is being done in India. However, it appears that the Medicines Regulatory Agency in the UK, MHRA, had asked for the data to be combined, and hence the presentation of 70% efficacy, when actually I think these are two separate trials, one with about 62% efficacy and the other one with about 90% efficacy. Same vaccine, but the dosing seems to have made a difference to the performance of the vaccines. So lots of interesting science questions there,
Right,
and
right.
lots of questions about how these data are being communicated.
Right, right, right. Well, let me come to you, Dr. Vish Karma. Well, to begin with, the error in the findings, or to say the slips, is it fairly common when a vaccine of a pandemic such as huge or gigantic proportion like COVID-19 is staring us? So is it expected to have such erroneous findings? Is it a part of racing towards having a vaccine or a candidate vaccine? Or is it something immensely erratic from both the companies and the other stakeholders?
Yeah, so answer is very simple. It is not expected with the kind of trials, kind of partners, kind of regulators involved.
Right.
It's not expected. It is very unusual. And I'm confused. Sometimes they say manufacturing error, sometimes they say dosing error. So I
Yes,
think these
yes.
are very two different kind of errors. We don't know. We have to. We are all speculating on this. What kind of error is that? Certainly, it is not expected. And like Dr. Kang said, for me it is puzzling that you are averaging out data of two different, entirely different trials, very bona fide, very interesting trial. In fact, the half dose trial is very, very interesting. We will learn a lot about this virus. So I think it could have been much more sort of robust to present both these
Okay.
trials. I hope by Monday they are publishing this data. I hope they published that data fully so that people across the world can. I mean, these are very good studies, but unnecessarily they got into these kind of controversies. But I am on your question. This is not expected in this kind of trials.
Right, right, right. Well, Mamta Gupta, let me come to you here, ma'am. The Serum Institute of India has said that there is no need to panic, right, amid this, and this is work in progress. So how do you see the findings of the clinical trial from AstraZeneca, and what's the way forward do you see over there? Like, will it be a delay, of course, or, I mean, usually whenever we encounter such an error, is it back to square one as we usually see in the trials or the clinical trials of any candidate vaccine?
Yeah, thank you. I think most of the things are being clarified by Dr. Gagandeep Singh. So they had admitted this issue, and they had informed the regulators, and they had taken the corrective action. And they had made these two groups. And Serum Institute was aware of this. And in India, they had the study which they are doing on, they are giving the full dose, full
Right.
2 doses to the participants. So even the WHO says that 50% vaccine efficacy would be good enough to deal with this corona pandemic. So even if it is between 60 to 70%, I would say it will be a good thing. So we will have something to deal with this pandemic. And with that, so that is why I think they are saying that there is no need to panic, and they are going ahead with their trial. There is no problem in basically in continuing the trial. We can go ahead and complete this trial. So and as such also the AstraZeneca vaccine also they completed, there's a second group with the full doses. So there should not be, I don't think there should be any issues, and we have approvals from all the regulators in this respect. So even 70% vaccine efficacy, I would say, is a good efficacy to
Okay.
prevent the disease, and especially those who are at higher risk, the healthcare providers, the population more than 60 years of age with comorbidities. So I think it will be a good option to prevent the morbidity and mortality among them.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. Dr. Gagandeep Singh, ma'am, like here there was a massive optimism when we heard about the clinical trials of the AstraZeneca and Oxford, and just days before they came up with the findings that there are some errors in the trials or the process of trials, to say off. They were actually arriving towards the near positive, or I mean the results that the vaccine could be there inside soon. Now with these findings, how far things would get slowed down if we just talk in especially the parlance of having vaccine arrived at a certain point of time, or has this finding delayed the arrival of vaccine or a candidate vaccine?
So, as Madhu has pointed out, the WHO, the FDA had agreed that any vaccine that performed above 50% would be an acceptable vaccine to bring forward for licensure. This is a vaccine that is over 60%. I see no reason why the companies, both Serum Institute and AstraZeneca, cannot apply for the emergency use authorization and, in the fullness of time, licensure of their vaccines based on the results that they've got. Vaccine, I think one of the things that we are being swayed by is the fact that we had reports saying 90%, 95%,
yes, absolutely, you're right. Yes, yes, yes.
But, you know, a 60% vaccine, 70% vaccine, as Madhu said, is a good vaccine. It's going to prevent a significant proportion of disease. And let's remember that this is a vaccine that we actually can use, unlike the Pfizer vaccine, which is going to require us to build a whole new cold storage system. But the way the company presented it, this raises doubt. When the company comes forward and first says, we have 90% efficacy, and then you find out that the 90% efficacy is in a much smaller number, and there is another set of people in whom it is actually 60 to 64% efficacy. When the details are not provided to you, when the headline numbers differ from the information that comes afterwards, then for a public health community as well as the general public, you begin to wonder, you know, what is driving this method of communication? The people in Oxford who are doing the vaccine trial are very well known for the quality of their science and the quality of their clinical trials. They are not inexperienced in this. So the communication is really AstraZeneca. And I think, quite frankly, there were other ways they could have played this. Much more detail rather than headline numbers. A clear laying out of what happened, when, who they communicated with, what their results are, would have been a much better approach than the one that they took. And this can be damaging in terms of the public trusting what is put out. It can be a very serious issue, especially at a time when these are completely new vaccines and we are so eagerly waiting for data.
Right. Ma'am, that's a very important point you raised. Let me just take it forward with Dr. Ramakrishna Vishwakarma. Sir, as Dr. Gagandeep Singh pointed out, there is a massive expectation, optimism. Now, given the size and scale of India, with such a findings, will that set any sort of panic in forth, and what are the measures to actually put any apprehensions to the rest?
Absolutely not. I think we have to look at the big picture scientifically. It is pretty amazing that we have a vaccine for coronavirus so quickly. Any vaccine.
Yes, and this is actually a fairly fast result. Yeah.
40 years we have been struggling and we have not got it. So I think I consider this is a really full force of science at work, whether Pfizer, AstraZeneca, or anybody else. So I think look at the big picture that now it seems possible, seriously possible, that we will have a vaccine for this virus. Maybe a month ago, it was all in realms of speculation. So I think it is a great step forward that we have 3 different constructs and showing clinical efficacy in phase 3 trials. I'm not bothered about number 95%, like anything above 50% is acceptable by all world regulators. So I think that's not important. We have crossed the threshold of having breakthrough in terms of dealing with the immunologically dealing with this virus through vaccine approach, which we were struggling with therapeutic approaches. There also we are making some headways in terms of antibodies. You must have heard 2 new antibodies have been approved last week, last 10 days in the United States of America, and small molecule also we are making. So I think I'm pretty amazed as a scientist that we really had made breakthrough on both sides. So I think that's a big picture that we have looked at. These are all, I think, they have not presented like Dr. Kang said. I think they have just done they should have come with a full disclosure, scientific disclosure. When you don't disclose things in science, all these kinds of questions, start happening. Somebody has reported today that in US FDA is getting now into this business and looking at this data very carefully. They have so everybody will start looking at this, why this is happening, and misstatements are being made. Like I am myself surprised that dosing error and manufacturing error to me is two different things. So I would like to know which is the error that has happened, and of course they could have presented actually positively, because it's pretty amazing that half dose. And I must tell you that in vaccines, there is no stable pharmacokinetics. There is no dose response like you have in the drugs. So what is small can be big, what is big can be small. So I think it's actually very interesting data which we have got suddenly by this, whatever mistake you call it. So as a scientist, I'm looking at this is a very good window to look at this virus from that perspective.
Sir, let me just ask you, just continuing on the point, your last point. So with the efficacy of as high, or to say the benchmark of, as you said, more than 50%, it's 70% even after them admitting an error. So it will not have any difference in terms of the quantum of dosage, you mean to say?
Can you repeat your question, please?
What I'm saying, like, in terms of the benchmark of the vaccine efficacy, you said anything more than 50% is fairly acceptable. Now here with 70% of efficacy, so will it have any difference in terms of dosage that needs to be given to the patients concerned, or for the trial purpose?
No, so this 70% number I don't accept. For me, there are two numbers, 62% and 90%.
Okay.
There are two different trials.
Right.
I will go by dosing of those trials. 70% number is actually, I don't know who in the imagination will average out two different trials and come to this 70% number. I don't accept that number. Number is 90% and 62%. That's the number.
Right. Dr. Gupta, like here, like, I mean, as we're discussing a way forward, like here, and Dr. Vish Karma actually pointed out in terms of the quantum of the dosage now. Now here it brings a very important question to us now. Are we then looking at having a vaccine arrive to us in fairly quick time, and considering that, this is possibly the fastest of the vaccine that we have developed? Is it so?
Yeah, this is really accelerated development of the vaccine, definitely. And if we are getting acceptable efficacy, we are quite hopeful, and it is quite an optimistic situation. And considering we do not have a very robust treatment for COVID-19 disease, so this is one of the preventive strategy. And although, having said that, I would also like to emphasize, please do not forget the importance of wearing masks and social distancing, because those interventions have also kept us safe till now. So this is another strategy. Now we are empowered more to deal with this pandemic, and we are quite hopeful that we are going to make a good control regarding to this new coronavirus with the vaccines.
Right. Dr. Kang, you have been emphasizing on a thorough research or the data of these clinical trials. Now, how will the study of several demographics on how and the candidates on which the vaccine was the trials were conducted, how will that help in further developing the vaccine? Could you just explain for the viewers concerned, how does that mechanism work?
So if we look at people who are going to get the vaccines, we grow up in all kinds of places. We have all kinds of different prior exposures to infectious diseases, to environmental pollution, as you have in Delhi. Right. Which influences our responses to infection and to vaccination. So if we evaluate vaccines in as many diverse populations as possible, we get a better sense of how the vaccines perform. So test them in young people, in old people, in children, in rich people, in people who live in the southern hemisphere, the northern hemisphere. Once we know how the vaccines perform in all of these locations, we can be confident about what we should expect as the impact of these vaccines in the prevention of disease. So the more populations, the better.
And currently, the clinical trials that are being conducted, is it really demographic specific, or is it a blanket test that has been done? And further, once we arrive at a suitable results of a candidate vaccine, we'll have further results vis-a-vis demographics. Is it so?
So right now, the studies for the AstraZeneca vaccine are being conducted on the AstraZeneca product in the UK, in Brazil, in South Africa, and in Japan. And we have evaluation of the Serum Institute equivalent product being done in India. Within these also, there are different age groups. So usually you'll take the younger groups first, the more healthy adult population, and then you move to the elderly. So that is being done. There are elderly groups there. And in South Africa, they have also included people who have exposure to HIV or are infected with HIV. So this will allow us to understand how the vaccine functions in healthy people, people with comorbidities, the elderly, and potentially the immunocompromised. Are there other groups that we should test the vaccine in? Yes, we are not testing yet in young children.
Okay.
We are not testing yet in pregnant women. And these are two important groups in whom we should be doing future clinical trials.
Right. Dr. Vish Karmakar, before we wrap up the program, let me ask you one important question as I see it. As we're testing on a vast group of very demographics, although as Madam Kang pointed out that there are certain groups that we should be testing further on. Now, you're fairly convinced that these tests, be it 2 figures or 1 figures, there is a benchmark efficacy. Let me just ask you one simple question. Is there any hit of credibility in terms of trials after this AstraZeneca episode?
I'm not really worried about this. This is a temporary phenomenon. This has happened. Let us look at the science. I think this is a great way forward for this vaccine also. Is a platform which was in the almost for last 15 years, we have been testing these platforms across the board. And I think this is the really big, that particular platform where we are using adenovirus sort of carrier as for the vaccine for this virus. So I think it will, in a way, it will raise the bar for the quality standards. Regulators will look data more carefully. They will be much more rigorous. So I think it will do more good than harm. I look at positive side from this. And other trials that are happening, they will be looked at more closely. And I think the kind of leeway which regulators were giving to companies in the COVID period, because we are aware that those stricter regimes actually have been slightly, if I can say, sort of facilitating the trial. I think there the regulator will sit back and look at data more carefully, and also scientific community will look at more carefully. And on the one positive side with this, whatever has happened is for us to analyze that, when we decide a dose, because a lot of vaccine trials, close to 200 plus are happening. I think a lot of people will look at their protocols once again. And this message has been given by the virus that, how I am behaving in the system. So I think there's a positive side on the both counts. So I'm not really worried about this. Indian trial will continue. And this trial also today, you must have heard that AstraZeneca has announced that they are going to start another trial just on the half dose, full dose basis. So that trial will happen, global trial. So that's a good news. This half dose, full dose also will get validated in these. And as far as safety is concerned, this has gone to a very rigorous phase 2 trial. All of these vaccines which we are talking about, they have gone to phase 2 trials. So I think there is no concern on that part. So I think news is look at news is really very good news from both these three of these vaccines that we are hearing in last few weeks. Yeah.
Well, that's it. On this note, we'll wrap up the show. Well, thanks a lot, Dr. Vish Karmakar, for joining us, Ma'am Gagandeep Singh and Dr. Mamta Gupta from PGMR Chandigarh. Well, thanks, three of you, for taking us through it and elucidating extremely the credibility of the clinical trials and the efficacy of the coronavirus vaccination. Well, before we wrap up the show, here is a small appeal by Rajat TV to all our viewers. Well, to defeat coronavirus pandemic, there are a few steps that need to follow. Wear face masks, wash hands regularly, maintain physical distancing at least 6 feet. Remember, these few things are all that is required to defeat the pandemic. Keep watching Rajat TV for national and international stories. Thank you.